What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the spot where we kick back and react to all kind of different things. Alright, so what we got going on today? Continuing on Kyle Hill's journey through his Half-Life stories. This next one up is... Oh man, I know I'm gonna mess this up. The Goiânia Incident? Oh, I know I butchered that. My apologies. South America's nuclear tragedy. All right, so let's go ahead and check this out, see how this story rolls out, see who's at fault, who's not, how much of it could have been prevented, how much of it wasn't prevented. Let's check it out. Let's go.
In the fall of 1987, scrapper Roberto dos Santos Alves decided that he could no longer ignore the rumors he'd been hearing. Hidden in the crumbling and cracking building near his home in Goiânia, Brazil, supposedly, was a scavenger's treasure. A treasure that looked like another man's trash. It was September 10th of that year when Alves and his friend Wagner Pereira descended on the site with simple tools, and after some poking and prying, they uncovered their treasure. What appeared to be a shiny metal capsule no larger than a thermos. Over the next few days, Alves was further able to disassemble the capsule, revealing something that looked even more...
Disassemble, I already know where this is going. You find something weird, don't be trying to open it up. Sometimes things are sealed away for a good reason.
More valuable. He had been vomiting and feeling dizzy during this time, but he thought it was just something that he ate. Alves took all the pieces they had by wheelbarrow to a one de Vieira Ferreira. The owner of the scrapyard gave Alves $25 for the shiny assembly and placed the pieces in his garage. When night fell, Ferreira noticed something odd. The pieces in his garage were glowing, and glowing blue. 3 days later, family and friends had been invited to see the blue oddity.
The fact that, seriously, look, that kills me. You see it glowing now, and you're still just like, ooh, that's interesting. Ah, come on.
And soon, Ferreira's employee, Ernesto Fabiano, had cracked the canister's 1mm thick glass window wide open, and the true treasure spilled out. It was 93 grams of a sparkling crystalline powder, less material than would fill a third of a soda can, that crumbled easily between the fingers. Fabiano took a large glowing crystal to make a ring for his wife, describing it like carnival glitter, and gave some of the powder to his brother to take home. Ferreira's brother dipped a finger into the dust and drew a cross across his abdomen. Family and friends sifted and examined. Over the next week,
oh man, over the next week, we already know it's gonna go bad. I'm just like, wow. I'm sorry. Even if you don't really know about, like, something starts glowing weird, you've never seen it before. Come on now. Your first thought shouldn't be, hey, let's decorate with this. Come on now.
Pieces of the original assembly would be distributed across multiple scrapyards, and glowing blue dust would be sprinkled in many homes and on many bodies across the city.
Ooh.
And so began one of the worst nuclear disasters in history.
Ooh.
This is the true story of the Goiânia Incident.
The Goiânia. Okay, I still didn't say it right, but now I know how it's said.
Goiânia is the capital and largest city of the Brazilian state of Goiás. It sits on the central Brazilian plateau, a region known for its cereal farms and cattle ranches. In 1971, a cancer treatment center local to Goiânia bought a radiotherapy machine, a device that focuses beams of energy emanating from highly radioactive source material into tumors. When the practice finally closed 14 years later, it didn't take the machine with it. It was abandoned, as was the building. Most of the clinic was subsequently demolished and left in a derelict state.
So now we know who's at fault. Come on now. Don't, like, they quit the practice but didn't properly dispose of the material. Come on now. That's just lazy. And dangerous. Obviously, as we're about to see from what we already got. Why? Why would you not disassemble and completely properly dispose of all the material, knowing that you're using a machine with radioactive material, thinking, oh, no one would ever. Yeah, we always think no one would ever until it happens.
this was already a disaster in potentia, as the radioactive heart of the therapy device was now an orphan source, a self-contained radioactive source no longer under proper regulatory control, lost, stolen, or otherwise unaccounted for, and that made it extremely dangerous, as the entire city would soon find out. The unstable nuclei inside of the orphan source Ernesto Fabiano would soon open were that of caesium-137, a common fission byproduct of the natural and man-driven decay of uranium. And, unfortunately for Goiânia, caesium-137 is one of the most problematic isotopes there is. It is seriously radioactive, has a relatively long half-life, and disperses quickly and easily through an environment, as one of its most regular chemical compounds is a water-soluble salt.
Ooh.
Widespread cesium contamination after both the Chernobyl and Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disasters is proof enough of cesium's deadly potential. Less than a quarter of a pound of caesium-137 salt doesn't sound like much. All of it would fit in a small sandwich bag, but the immense potential of the nuclear and the social and curious nature of humans meant that it was more than enough to trigger the screening of more than 100,000 Brazilians in the fall of 1987. Not all of them would return home, and many wouldn't have homes to return to. In biology, there is a term called an evolutionary trap. This is where some evolved behavior can suddenly become maladaptive in a rapidly changing environment. Sea turtles, for example, who evolved over millions of years to hatch and then use the moon to find their way to the sea, can exhaust themselves and die in a modern world where many beaches and coastlines are lined with artificial lights much brighter than the moon and facing in the wrong direction. Australian jewel beetles can take themselves out of the gene pool by mistakenly mating with similarly shaped and colored discarded beer bottles. The human penchant for the shiny and glossy made 93 grams of caesium-137 dangerously attractive in a similar way. It is relevant to note, said a 1988 report by the International Atomic Energy Agency, that the interest aroused by the blue glow that emanated from the radioactive caesium chloride significantly affected the course of the accident. End quote.
Yep, because people see shiny and they're like, ooh, what's that? Man, just like with animals, you keep this one rule. The prettier it looks, the more dangerous it is. That's how it is with animals. You need to do that with pretty much everything in nature. Stuff you find on the ground, everything. The prettier it looks, the more dangerous it most likely is. And most of the time, it checks out.
In other words, if the caesium did not have an almost supernatural glow, more people would have survived.
Yeah, because if it was just regular white powder, there would have been no interest in it. The dude who broke it open would have definitely got sick, maybe some of his relatives and stuff, but it wouldn't have spread through the whole town and everything, because they wouldn't be like, ooh, it's glowing, let's do this, let's sell this, let's spread this around, you know? So I definitely agree with that. But still, like, more people need to follow that rule. The prettier it looks, the more potentially dangerous it could be.
After Ernesto Fabiano opened the Pandora's box the young scrappers had found, the curious powder was passed between no fewer than 22 Ferreira family members. For 5 days, fragments the size of rice grains were given to several families. Devair's wife, Maria Gabriela, covered her pajamas in the sparkling blue dust in her bedsheets. Her mother came to visit her when she started vomiting and then returned home days later, bringing contamination with her. After Odison Ferreira held the gleaming dust in his hands, he went back to work. He was a bus driver. He came into contact with dozens of people. Devair's brother, Ivo, brought back some crystals to his house too. His 6-year-old daughter, Legia, was infatuated. She rubbed the crumbling glitter all over her arms and hands. She ate her lunch while admiring how her fingers were sparkling. Within 10 minutes, she was throwing up.
What?
Within 10 days of opening the cesium capsule, a significant number of people were vomiting, had diarrhea, and displayed skin lesions and burns.
And the fact that it was happening so fast, nobody put 2 and 2 together? Nobody was like, yo, this past week, everybody's getting sick. What changed? Oh, boy's bringing this powder around everybody. You know, something should have clicked. Oh, man.
Local doctors put the symptoms on obscure tropical diseases or food poisoning.
Oh, come on,
At this
really?
point, no one really knew what seemed to be killing Goiânia's families. That was until Maria Gabriela, convinced that the glowing blue powder was the true culprit, got on a
Finally, somebody with a brain right here. Like, come on now. Finally. Like, how hard is like the doctors, the quote unquote professionals, just pass it off as, oh, random diseases and everything, not noticing the pattern? Come on now. Why is it so many people who are in a position of authority just dropping the ball?
a bus with an employee of her husband's junkyard and headed for a nearby public health department. The employee was carrying the radiotherapy assembly and all the glowing blue powder he could find in a bag slung over his shoulder. An intense radiation burn would later reveal exactly which shoulder the bag was on.
I bet.
On September 28, 1987, Maria Gabriela, who had been dizzy and vomiting for days at this point, walked into the Vigilancia Sanitaria and placed the bag carrying the remains of the radiotherapy unit on a doctor's desk. This, she said firmly, this was killing her family. The doctor dismissed both Maria and the junkyard employee to a health center and then later to a tropical diseases center where a number of those who had handled the glowing powder were now showing up. The doctor eventually got worried enough about the mysterious bag Maria was carrying that he moved it to this chair in the courtyard of the health center. At the same time, another doctor on site was starting to suspect that the many skin lesions being reported were not from any tropical disease, but from radiation damage.
Fine.
He contacted yet
Why
another...
does it take so long for the people with a brain to start to get worried about this stuff? It's like if the right people would have thought about what's going on ahead of time or earlier, you know, we feel like maybe more lives could have been saved, because the first people lined up were just idiots. Just like, wow.
Another doctor who was working at the Tropical Diseases Center, only to discover that he wasn't the first doctor who had called him about suspicious symptoms. It was decided to have a visiting medical physicist come and inspect the bag Maria had brought, but the physicist wouldn't be able to do so for at least another day. The next morning, the visiting physicist had borrowed a scintillometer from a local government agency, usually used for geology, and set out towards the Vigilancia Sanitaria. He decided to switch the meter on before he entered the building.
Smart.
And the meter immediately indicated the highest value it could measure. No matter what direction the physicist pointed the detector, the radiation levels were off the charts. Something must be wrong with the meter, he thought. So he returned to the local government agency to get a replacement. 2 hours later, he returned with a new meter, but again, the scintillometer displayed the highest amount of radioactivity that it could.
If you had any doubts at that point, you already know. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. Hadn't even entered the building yet. Nowhere near the actual bag.
Good. Simultaneously, the doctor who saw Maria Gabriela had called the fire department. The physicist, now convinced that there was a major source of radiation inside the health center, had to persuade the firefighters not to go near the source. And that's because they were planning on picking up the bag and throwing it in the nearest river.
No.
The rest of the day was a blur of activity.
No, people need to start thinking really need to educate everyone in the world about what proper disposal actually is. Why is it like, oh, this is dangerous, throw it in the river? Like, really? Come on now.
40 minutes later, the police and fire brigades helped evacuate everyone from the health center. An hour after that, doctors had descended on Deveyer Ferreira's junkyard and found the same off-the-charts readings. Ferreira and his family, who had to be convinced, were evacuated. Over the next few hours, government agencies were contacted, the Secretary for Health was informed, and the National Nuclear Energy Commission was brought up to speed. By nightfall, the Secretary for Health had made the city's Olympic Stadium a staging ground for receiving potentially contaminated persons. And the Tropical Diseases Hospital, the first to see many of the suspicious symptoms, was informed that their patients were in fact irradiated. Known sites of contamination were resurveyed, and the Civil Defense Force was put on alert.
Okay. Yep, all the responses that you would hope to see. But they had to convince the family. Like, really? You guys were basically ground zero of this, and all y'all are sick, and y'all had to be convinced? Like, come on.
The Estadio Olímpico Pedro Ludovico has a capacity of 13,500 people. Beginning on September 30th, the National Nuclear Energy Commission would monitor over 112,000 people there on the field. Those most affected by the radiation were placed in tents, and more people throughout the city were showing up after hearing rumors. Many tried to go to the Olympic Stadium simply for reassurance. Although no local plans for responding to radiological emergencies on this scale had existed, concluded the 1988 report by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the authorities' improvised strategy worked effectively in bringing the situation under control and preventing further serious exposure.
Good.
Contaminated persons were directed to take showers and place their clothes in bags. This reduced the ticking of radiation meters by between 50 and 80%, and monitoring equipment was set up to screen the hundreds lining up outside the stadium.
That's crazy. That lets you know just how much or just how far and wide the radiation has spread. Just by them showering and storing away the clothing, just that alone was able to get the machines, the readings to drop significantly. That lets you know the contamination was insane.
Unfortunately, decontamination was only partially successful, as the most affected victims were constantly sweating out the caesium-137 that had accumulated inside of their bodies. In the early morning hours of September 30th, authorities returned to the Vigilancia Sanitaria to contain the remainder of the source, first brought in by bus by Maria Gabriela. A small crane was used to lower a section of sewer pipe over the chair where the bag still sat, and then concrete was pumped in over the wall to seal the chair inside the pipe forever. Radiation rates dropped dramatically.
I bet.
Of the 112,000 people monitored for caesium-137 exposure in Goiânia, 1,000 had received the equivalent of an entire year's worth of normal background radiation in just a few days. 249 people were seriously contaminated either externally or internally through direct contact with the caesium dust, and of those people, 20 displayed acute radiation sickness, needing immediate hospital treatment. These patients were transported to hospitals across.
Man, you said background radiation absorbed a year's worth in a day. Just, wow. That is
Brazil.
scary.
But at Goiânia General Hospital, the patients were left uncared for 2 days, as no one on site had the training to deal with the irradiated.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's not their fault. They don't have the training for it.
19 of the 20 most contaminated had some sort of serious skin injury. Swelling, bronzing, blistering, loss of skin entirely. Ernesto Fabiano, who took a rice grain-sized chunk of caesium to make a ring for his wife, ended up putting that piece in his pocket against his thigh. The radiation ate all the way into his largest muscles. The bus driver, Odison Ferreira, lost most of the skin on his hand where he handled the powder and would end up losing the tips of some fingers. The rupture of a medical device in Goiânia resulted in the worst case of caesium-137 contamination in medical history, a history that includes both Fukushima Daiichi and Chernobyl. And sadly, not all of the tragically curious 20 would survive.
Yeah, that was kind of a given, though.
The goal of this documentary is not to exploit the trauma or the injuries of the people of Goiânia. Rather,
not.
it is to show how the unimaginable potential of nuclear reactions can lead to disaster when not properly respected, managed, and communicated. This could be no clearer than after Legia Ferreira died, the 6-year-old who thought she was playing with fairy dust. After Legia succumbed to acute radiation poisoning, her body was transferred to be buried in a cemetery back in Goiânia. The news of her impending burial caused a riot of nearly 2,000 people.
They didn't want her
They
buried
believed
out there.
that her body would poison the land. They used stones and bricks to block the car carrying her body.
Wow.
But she was still successfully buried in a special fiberglass coffin, lined with lead. The military also had to hold back protesters during the burial of Israel Baptista dos Santos, one of the scrapyard employees who dismantled the cesium capsule for its lead. Admilson Alves de Souza, aged 18, worked with dos Santos and also died. Maria Gabriela, aunt of Legia and wife of Devair, died on the same day as her niece, 1 month after exposure. The Goiânia incident would end up costing 4 lives. The contamination of an entire city and an economic catastrophe, all from less material than would fill half of a tennis ball.
And that's it's like, don't even know what to say about that. It's like, yeah, 4 people lost. Happy wasn't more. Sad. You know, you look at it, it's like it seems kind of messed up the way the writers were going at them, but at the same time, you kind of got to understand the fear behind it, and they're worried because, I mean, their fear is justified. You know, they had to put them in special coffins so they wouldn't contaminate the area any further, which is, you know, which is good that's taken care of. But as a regular citizen, I can understand the paranoia and fear that comes with that. Like, what if something went wrong with the design? What if the exposure does happen? You know, it's a lot of scary thoughts that could trigger that. So I get why they were really, you know, out there rioting like that. Was a little overboard? I would think so, you know, because people, you know, freak out. But this whole situation is just crazy.
If there is anything at all good to say about the Goiânia incident, it's that the situation was brought under control by swiftly acting public and private personnel extremely quickly. Within 3 days of discovering that it was the glowing blue powder that was burning through unfortunate families, all sources of exposure were identified and contained. By the following Saturday, the main concerns were patient treatment and the cleanup of contaminated sites. A helicopter was brought in to survey more than 67 square kilometers. Detectors mounted inside of cars checked on and around more than 2,000 kilometers of roads. 85 houses were significantly contaminated. 42 of them were decontaminated with vacuums and pressure washers. The rest, along with several city blocks, were demolished. 3 buses, 14 cars, and 50,000 rolls of toilet paper were also now radioactive. In total,
50. Why is that so random? 50,000 rolls of toilet paper. Is there some? What is it about toilet paper? Is it easily contaminated? That's just so weird to me. The toilet paper? Why? I know I must be missing something. What is it about toilet paper that makes it easily radioactive? I don't know.
3,500 cubic meters of waste was sealed away, around 1.5 Olympic swimming pools of caesium poisoned material. By Christmas, all the main sites of contamination were dealt with, and work continued with the hopes of returning the area to normal for the next 3 months. But while dust can be buried and homes can be rebuilt, the people of Goiânia lived with the lingering effects of just a handful of glowing powder for the rest of their lives.
Man, now I bet people out there is like anything that glows, like glow sticks or anything like that. Yeah, that probably traumatized them. Like, nothing that glows, nothing that glows. I could imagine. I'd be like that. I could see myself being like that after experiencing something like that. If it glows, that'd be a traumatic trigger right there.
Family lost everything. Their homes had to be destroyed. Irradiated pets had to be put down.
Oh, that sucks.
Whole family histories packed into drums of nuclear waste and buried. The junkyard owner, Defayir, pictured here, died 7 years after his wife Maria Gabriela Leger, reportedly due to a plunging depression and years of heavy drinking. Wagner Pejera, one of the 2 original thieves of the orphan source, would be scarred for life. The bus driver, Odison Ferreira, was marked in a similar way, losing parts of his fingers and the skin on his hands. And the damage done in Goiânia wasn't all physical. After the incident, Odison recalls being ostracized by his community. His neighbors, as they did with Leger's burial, tried to block his family from moving into certain neighborhoods. He ended up getting a vasectomy because he was now too afraid to have any more children.
I mean, the vasectomy thing, I get that. But yeah, when it comes down to it, You know, it's like you didn't know, but at the same time, you got people out there to be like, common sense. You didn't know what that was. Why were you messing with it? Knowing that there was probably some other people out there that probably would have done the same thing. Let's be honest. But yeah, it sucks. It really does suck to get ostracized like that. And it's like, yeah, it was his fault. He shouldn't have been messing with something he didn't know nothing about. At the same time, he's the one who suffered most. It was his family that was affected most. So it's not to say that he didn't suffer. He suffered greatly. So yeah, being ostracized on top of that, yeah, it just sucks, man.
Still have pain in my hands, especially when the temperature changes, Odison told Beyond Nuclear International in 2018. Sometimes my hands are so hot that I have to put them in the freezer. Today, Odison is the president of the Association of Caesium Victims of Goiânia, which has more than 1,600 members seeking continued compensation and medical treatment.
Okay.
In 2017, he received an honorary Lifetime Achievement Award at the Uranium Film Festival for his many decades of advocacy. The original radiotherapy capsule, taken by the military back in 1987, is now on display at the School of Specialized Instruction in Rio de Janeiro, and is much less fatally attractive. The accident in Goiânia, the 1988 report by the International Atomic Energy Agency concludes, shows how actions that would have been innocuous under ordinary circumstances became matters of life and death. If humans weren't such social creatures, if we didn't like to touch and to share, if caesium-137 weren't so radioactive, enough to ionize the air around it, this disaster might have been avoided entirely. Instead, a curious consequence of our quest to fully harness the near limitless potential of the nuclear lives on to scar the minds, hearts, and hands of the people of Goiânia. After the cancer treatment clinic was abandoned in 1985, one of its owners tried to return and recover some of the objects left behind, including the radiotherapy machine. A court-appointed police force stopped him, as the owners of the land the clinic was built on disputed the final state of the building. Now deterred, the man warned that they would be responsible, quote, for what would happen with the caesium bomb. End quote. And all this happened 4 months before the incident.
What? Oh, this wasn't after? I was thinking, hold up, bring that back.
It would have been innocuous under
This happened
ordinary
before the
circumstances became matters of life and death. If humans weren't such social creatures, if we didn't active, avoided, entirely harness the near and hands
too far back.
of it was abandoned in After the cancer treatment clinic was abandoned in 1985, one of its owners tried to return and recover some of the objects left behind, including the radiotherapy machine. A court-appointed police force stopped him, as the owners of the land the clinic was built on disputed the final state of the building. Now deterred, the man warned that they would be
disputed the final state of the building. So they were mad at how the building looked being abandoned and decided, no, you can't take anything out of here. That's why I say people are dumb. You get mad and just start doing stuff for no reason.
Responsible, quote, for what would happen with the caesium bomb.
So he let them know, yo, there's caesium in there. If somebody runs into this, is going to be a problem. Why is it with almost every one of these stories, there was a warning beforehand? It's like, how it's like growing up watching movies, especially in like the 80s and 90s, they always had the disaster situation. It was like, we warned you this could happen. And it's just like, you see it in the movies and you're thinking, nah, we'd be smarter than in real life. Apparently not. Wow. And if that's a direct quote, so he let them know caesium bomb, which means this is a problem if you leave it here and don't address the situation. He let them know. And so not only did they not let them take it, but they didn't do anything to prevent it. Oh boy, just saw an abandoned building and just found the little piece and stuff. They didn't put up any fencing around there, no warning signs, anything to... And he told them what was in there. They knew. irresponsible on the highest level.
And all this happened 4 months before the incident.
4 months.
And records now show that the state court of Goiás, Brazil, knew that there was radioactive material inside the abandoned building for more than a year before 2 young men looking for scrap metal accidentally started the worst radiological disaster in Latin America's history.
All right, that's a lot of lawsuits right there.
Until next time.
Yes.
Thank you so much to the very nerdy staff at the facility for their direct and substantial support in the creation of this here video. Today,
yes, thank you to everyone who supports this, all the Patreons, everybody who helped to put this together. These episodes are great, and I'm really enjoying them. But yeah, it's the reoccurring theme here are people who are ignoring the problem, the potential problem. You know, Fukushima. You know, I still stand by that wave was too big. It was still going to destroy everything in its path. But if they were taking more precautions, the radioactive material may not have spilled out the way it did. You know, the building might have got demolished, but the actual dangerous material might have been a little bit more contained. And there's so many other situations. It's always like somebody knew and ignored. This is what happens when you're irresponsible. And this is what I like about Kyle. He brings up both the positive and the negative sides of nuclear. He advocates to why we should use it, but he also goes in really deep about what we need to do to use it properly. You know, incredibly dangerous material, but at the same time, we know the methods to use it properly and keep everybody safe. But the moment those procedures are ignored, the moment people get careless, this is when it causes a huge problem. So I guess because of that, I get why people would be so apprehensive about using nuclear energy. Because while we do have all the safety measures, it's like what happens when stupid gets involved? Because stupid knows no bounds, you know? Oh well, it's crazy. Wish these things wouldn't happen, but you know, preventable disasters. I don't know why I can't talk. Preventable disasters. It's sad. But, oh well, what can you do? Better. That's what you can do, right? All right, y'all. Y'all know what to do. Go down in the comment section. Let me know what y'all thought about this one. Let me know what you'd like to see me react to next. Hit that like button before you go. Share this video with everyone you know. And subscribe if you haven't done so already. All right? So, till next time, take care of yourselves. And I'm out of here.